Carolyn and I mentioned, spent many evenings last fall trying to light up the darkness around the Fredericton Watercolor Clinic. The days leading up to Christmas and Mother's Day are my favorite time to talk about life issues. Christmas softens all of our hearts to every helpless, naked child. And we've just celebrated motherhood in all its glorious forms. I was reading a little story the other day a mother wrote. She had 5 children, and they had just been to visit friends. These friends had this amazing place, and the children had a wonderful time all day long. They had a barn with rabbits, they had a pond filled with fish for fishing and boating. They played basketball all day. And at the end of the day, her 8-year-old said to her as yet childless guest, "I bet your children just can't wait to be born." And I thought, isn't that one of the keys to this whole issue? If we could convince everyone that every single child just can't wait to be born, and that for every child there's a just can't wait to be mothered. But the issue is not that easy, is it? My family and I just watched Judgment at Nuremberg. It was on TV recently, and we were all reminded how widespread was the belief in Germany during Hitler's time that at least some of the atrocities committed were necessary for political and economic reasons. And that brings us to the sinister reasons why we still have abortion. The abortion and sex education industries are multi-billion-dollar industries. Planned Parenthood, as the largest provider of abortion, is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Planned Parenthood, as the largest provider of sex education programs, is a multi-million-dollar industry. Planned Parenthood offered our present sex education course that we have in New Brunswick. These two industries, the abortion industry and the sex education industry, are one. These industries have, in many countries, including our own, a virtual monopoly on the sexually active and pregnant mind through our healthcare system, and on the minds and souls of all children in our public education system through our sex education. The sex education course that the Premier of Ontario just planned, at least temporarily, is virtually the same course that we have in our schools right now. This course is so radically distorted that 3 times I've been asked to speak about it to a group, and I've had to change my talk completely because there were teenagers in the room. Let's just say that the New Brunswick sex education course teaches children to seek sexual gratification at the youngest age with an infinite number of partners in an infinite number of ways. And they're told at the same time that when or if they get pregnant, they can have an abortion. And as if they are not going to get pregnant with this type of sex education program. What has been produced through these industries and with the help of the media is a culture of death. And this culture asks 2 questions. How can we help you make death a part of your problem, a part of your solution to your problem? And how can we make money on it at the same time? An amazing group of women and men, who many of whom are here tonight, work tirelessly but unsuccessfully to keep the sex education program out of our schools. And I want to acknowledge them. I think it's wonderful that they're here. began my practice, there was at times intense pressure to refer for abortions. But as time went on, this seemed to lessen. And part of it was probably that it became known in the community that I did not refer for abortion. And part of it was probably that it became easier for me to explain my reasoning. And I would tell patients that I could no longer help them take the life of their unborn child than I could take their newborn child. And I would explain that doctors face lots of ethical problems. We're often asked to give sick leave or a disability request for someone who, in our opinion, was not sick or was not disabled. We're frequently asked to write a prescription on someone else's name who has insurance coverage. So these kind of ethical problems are frequently presented to physicians. And so this may be the little serious one, but it's not uncommon. And I think it's important, and I would remind patients that the Code of Ethics of the Canadian Medical Association still supports a physician's right not to make medical decisions that violate their ethical stand and their ethical opinion. This right will be preserved if pro-life physicians continue to be members of these organizations and take leadership roles in these associations, and they must be encouraged to do so. At first it surprised me when the mothers of, they're the same women that I refused to refer for abortion, would come back to me and ask me to care for their next baby that they were keeping. They instinctively felt, I'm sure, that I would always do what was best for their baby. This experience is common to all pro-life doctors. I never once had a request for euthanasia or assisted suicide in my years of practice. I believe people who are dying separate themselves into two groups. There are those who believe in eternity, and there are those who do not believe in an eternity. Those who believe in an eternity believe in a creator who they fear might not like euthanasia. Those who don't believe in an eternity, in my experience, are often happy to live even with great suffering, rather than face the fear of their nothingness. The push for euthanasia comes from those who fear that their standard of living will be lowered by money spent on those who care for the dying, and from those who see this issue as a way of pushing forth their view of the world. The fact that the average person so rarely requests assisted suicide or euthanasia presents a problem for the promoter of these forms of homicide. The problem is solved, however, by coercing the mentally ill, severely depressed, even psychotic patients into requesting assisted suicide. And more euthanasia is carried out on patients without their consent. And we see that coming out of Holland, who has had the most experience with euthanasia. Euthanasia is knocking on our door, and despite the speed of bill, thankfully the speed of bill is created for it, when it arrives, it will affect every single one of us, if it arrives. Because make no mistake about it, the euthanasia movement is the goal of the euthanasia movement